Welcome back. You're watching Credlin. Well, former Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has formally ended her work for collapsed finance firm Greensill Capital following revelations she was paid $800,000 a year as lobbying. Ms Bishop amended her disclosures to the lobbyist register in recent days to remove Greensill from the client list of her consulting firm Julie Bishop and Partners. Cosmetics giant L'Oreal Australia is now her remaining sole client. To discuss this and more, I'm joined by my stellar international panel from Sydney, co-host of Outsiders, James Morrow, and from Adelaide, host of Bernardi, Corey Bernardi. Corey, the Attorney General's office say they're still looking into Julie Bishop's work for Lex Greensill, even if some left-wing Liberals on that Senate committee that are supposed to look into Greensill's work managed to prevent her from being called to give evidence. You know the issue well. Does the former loyal deputy here have questions to answer?
Well, the first thing is any former minister is allowed to earn a job and as a lobbyist if they comply with the rules. The problem here is that Julie Bishop didn't comply with the rules. She was organising meetings with Matthias Cormann or trying to arrange for Greensill to get into the public service pay packet game without declaring that she was on the pay packet of Greensill itself and she was a lobbyist. That is the big problem here. And so I hope the protection racket doesn't kick in. Well, this is the thing, I don't understand. Well, she should front, and that's the problem. But I'm hoping the protection racket won't kick in. You know how it works, Peter, that the loyal deputy doesn't have to obey the same rules because they know that the tribe will kick in for it. But I just think it's wrong. Australia deserves transparency when it comes to lobbying, particularly when it comes to former ministers. We've seen similar affairs where ministers leave, they go into consulting firms which aren't lobbying firms because they're precluded to for 2 years, but they have massive consulting in, say, defence contracts here in South Australia. It is a scandal, and I really think something needs to be done about it.
James, just a quick one. Big protests in France, COVID restrictions. Emmanuel Macron has said from now on in, everyone in France to get into a venue or whatever has to show a vaccine passport. Now, only just over half of the French population have had their first vaccine dose. That's pretty tough.
It's pretty tough, and I think, it's pretty amazing. I don't know if you've got any of the footage of those protests, but there were pretty amazing, pretty violent protests on the street of Paris. Now, I know the French love a protest, and of course, this was Bastille Day, no less, that this was all going on. But that said, this issue right here that we're seeing on the streets of Paris is going to play out everywhere, including Australia. The great danger, you've got these vaccines which are supposed to do a great job at keeping you from getting sick, keeping you from dying, going to hospital with coronavirus. But the danger is, pardon me, that societies wind up saying, oh, well, there's two classes of people. There's the vaccinated and unvaccinated, and that's going to be the real issue. And, we in Australia here need to keep a very close eye on this, too, because it is great that people are going out and getting the vaccine. I totally support that, but what we cannot have is a scenario where, to get into a venue, to get into a pub, to go to a game, to get onto a plane, you have to show some sort of proof that you've been vaccinated. No, the point is that we, as many of us can get vaccinated, and that gives us the generalized herd immunity to make COVID much less of a big deal. That's what we need to remember. The end goal is not a pass system, depending on whether or not you've had the jab.
All right, gents, I've got a couple of things I could get to. We know Dan Tehan's out there very angry at the EU, basically calling it protectionism if they push on carbon tax credits. Boris Johnson in the UK, under a lot of pressure, we know he's holding the big Glasgow summit at the end of the year, to dump a plan to force everyone in Britain to replace their gas boilers with a whole lot of green alternatives. Households would be spending up to $10,000 a pop. His new Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is like the Treasurer here, Rishi Sunak, was bailed up by the very good interviewer Andrew Neil over how all of this would be paid for. Let's have a look.
How much will it cost?
Well, I think it's hard to put a specific figure on it, and actually we're doing some work which will be published later this year.
The truth is, Chancellor, and the Treasury knows this, it just won't make it public, the costs are eye-watering.
Well, of course there are costs in transition.
Who's going to pay for that?
Well, we're already actually, Andrew, investing in helping low-income households with exactly that transition.
An average cost of £10,000 per household, which will be mandated by the government. Who pays?
Well, Andrew, as we've talked about, we all collectively pay one way or another.
The real cost of net zero. This is where the rubber hits the road, Corey.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Dan Tehan is absolutely right to be furious at the Europeans. They are giant socialists and want protectionism. But when it comes to all this climate change malarkey and all these feel-good things, it is all about the coin, and we can't afford to do this stuff. It's not going to make any difference to the planet. We have good environmental policies we can implement without trying to pretend we're going to influence the weather and the climate. And the spending trillions of dollars futile, throwing it against the wall, is a complete waste of time. That, Peter, was reminiscent of what Jonathan Lee did to Bill Shorten at the last election.
Yeah, absolutely was. We've got him here now on Sky News. Watch out next election. Hey, an update on the Ginger and the Whinger, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. They've received this special award, James, from a sustainability charity called Population Matters for, and I quote, their enlightened decision to have only 2 children. This is lecturing from environmentalists. This is extraordinary. This is now the climate cult getting into people's bedrooms. What's it going to do to Al Gore? I mean, he's got 4 children. Goodness me.
I mean, look, it's so funny that, the environmentalists always give the game away when they start out with these anti-natalist, anti-people, anti-baby policies. But, it is funny. The thing that struck me is the last couple of years since COVID started, we've seen the world becoming more and more like China. We've got, the authoritarian surveillance. We've got the lockdowns. We've got all the things straight out of Wuhan. And now, we're being encouraged to adopt their limits on children policies. So it's really, it's not about liberty, it's not about the environment, it's all about control, and it's actually really quite anti-human and quite sinister, I think, Peter, when you really drill down to what it's all about.
Yeah, Corey, just quickly, I mean, this is heavy involvement of the state in our lives. I mean, this is what they do in Beijing.
Yeah, you both make excellent points there, and it is a huge issue. I mean, celebrating the fact that there's not even replicating ourselves in the population space is crazy. And if you trace all of this back, the Greens, the deep green movement, the people who are through the World Economic Forum, they've all been about depopulating the planet to save it. And I think that's a tragedy. It is about dehumanising it, placing the needs of polar bears and green frogs and whatever else ahead of human beings. And I think that's absolute madness. But we've got to continue to bell it, Peter, and that's what we're doing on your show.
Absolutely. Well, and yours too. You're filling in for Andrew Bolt in just a minute. I better let you go. James Morrow, as always, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.